Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, 2 stakes races on tap at Laurel Park on Sunday. Let's throw up the field for race number 8. Talk about a big and bulky field for the $100,000 Weather Vane 3-year-old fillies going 3/4 of a mile. Full field of 13. You Almost Had Me on the far outside is likely to be the favorite. Brad Cox, Sheldon Russell, very versatile. Stakes winner on dirt, stakes winner on synth.
I know she's probably going to be the favorite in here, Dan, but I thought this was a great betting race, sort of top to bottom, wide open. Obviously, you get that with a big field, but several fillies in here, they're either maybe switching surfaces, cutting back in distance, or they've just been consistent throughout their careers. So obviously, the outside runner warrants a lot of attention, but I think there's maybe another direction to go for the top spot.
I agree 100%. I think pace might make this race, and Timeform US believes that the pace will be strong. Note the red bar indicating a fast early pace. Irish Maxima returned off a lengthy layoff to post a gate-to-wire score. Miss Harriet is a very fast horse, as is Yellow Feather, so this pace could heat up quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of horses in here once you kind of look outside of that. I know here it's a little scattered in terms of mid-pack. I think there's probably 4 or 5 fillies in here that really want to be mid-pack. So I could see this sort of clustering where there's sort of a front pack, a mid-pack, and then towards the back. I think there could be kind of 3 little groups going on early.
Let's start things off with the number 1, Runaway Diva, who's coming into this race in sharp form after a win in a 1-turn mile event at Colonial. It was only a first-level allowance, but I really liked the way she burst to the lead with a mid-race move and kept on going. She's obviously in good form, but she's stepping way up in class.
She's stepping up, but I feel like even though it was just a first-level allowance last time out, those races at Colonial on the dirt, Dan, I feel like a lot of them were pretty speedy. That track was very, speed favoring. And look at the fractions for a mile event and the fact that she was sort of close to the thick of things early, then was able to draw clear. I thought it was a good performance. She seemed to appreciate getting back on the dirt. And, it was nice to see her rebound. Her turf efforts were okay, but it's kind of almost a little shocking. That's probably why she was 11-1 in that spot, that she got back on the dirt and she got back to her winning ways.
The 2, Rowan Goddess, is going to repeat the turf to dirt move that resulted in her win in an off-grass stakes at Laurel 2 starts back. That was the Searching, going a 1-turn mile. Rowan Goddess looked very good in this race. I know it was only a 4-horse field. I know it was only an off-turf event, but she was just cruising into the lane and then puts them away without much fuss.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you look at this, I think the takeaway is how nicely she does it. And you talked about it. It's a short field. It was rained off the turf. This is what you're going to get. But they went very slow early on, and she was a couple of lengths off the pace. And then she blows by everyone and does it really easy. And at least kind of looking at the final, 2 furlongs of the race, she was able to pick it up a little bit. So that's kind of what you would hope, especially if they went that slow early on. And go down the page. I know they tried her on the turf several times. I don't think she likes the turf. I think she's a dirt horse through and through. And, you go back to her prior dirt effort outside of the Searching in the wide country. She was a good 3rd behind Miss Harriet. So I think there's something to like here for Hammy Smith's training.
And she might have the right running style for this race, able to sort of tuck in behind those early speeds. Popover Gal, the number 3, goes out for veteran trainer Ned Allard, who's had a tremendous amount of success this year for Marilyn Campbell's Stonehenge. Popover Gal won her first 2 starts in likable fashion. Then they threw a little speed at her in the Chenery last time out. She couldn't keep up early, gave an even performance, but I think she gained good experience from that race.
Again, and there goes to that Colonial speed that we've seen. That was at 7/8, very different than the inside runner that we talked about going a mile, but they still went 44-2 to the half in there. 108 for 6 furlongs. I mean, that is cruising there on the main track, and she couldn't keep up with them. I think, it's interesting to see her go back to 6 furlongs. It's been good to her. I think it works well for her, and I just wonder longer term what the plan for her will be. She's by Kozan. I wouldn't be surprised if they try her around 2 turns eventually. But I think going back to what's been so good for her so far, this is a good spot for her to tackle stakes competition once again.
Carmelina, the number 4, is just a hardy horse. She started 13 times without a break. She's won stakes over multiple surfaces, including at Laurel. She was a stakes winner at Colonial 2 starts back, then didn't have the easiest trip last time out in the Grade 3 Prioress. Butchery looking forward to running her here. He says he's running out of time to run against straight 3-year-old fillies, so he's going to give it another shot, and she's another that could be part of the pace.
She certainly could be, and I don't want to say that she is a front runner only. Obviously, when you go 3 starts back, at Presque Isle, she was at least able to close off the pace. And sure, it was a different surface, but I think when you go down her PPs and her page here, you look at her and you go, oh, she might need the lead. When you go back to those races in New York, they were also going longer. We're talking a mile and an eighth. And I don't think at the 6 furlong trip, she needs the lead. She's obviously quick. We talked about the race at Colonial. She was on the front end, and for her to sustain her rally, I think that's the thing to focus in on. She could be dangerous if she's forwardly placed, and she does not need the lead to win. So to me, I think she's a major contender for that top spot.
The light bulb really went on for the 5 Brook Mesa ever since blinkers were added to the equation. 2 blowout victories for trainer Terry Pompey, including her most recent start, a first-level allowance race at Monmouth, where she sat just off the lead, took over at will, and went about her business. She needs a little bit of a buyer boost against this tougher field, but she still has a lot of upside.
And at least she got that boost somewhat last time out. And we talk about it, and sometimes I say this like a broken record. It's tough to face winners for the first time, just not having that experience. And for her to do the same thing visually, I thought was impressive. And, she's going to have to take that to a different circuit now, first time in Maryland, and especially at Laurel Park. But, I think in terms of her trip might work out here. If we think there's a lot of pace on paper and she's going to be sitting right off of it, assuming she can kind of crank it late like she was able to in those last 2, she could be a player.
After winning her first 2 starts last year, Kentucky Derby winning trainer John Service treated Irish Maxima like a pretty nice horse, running her in the Frizette and then in a salty stakes race at Churchill Downs. She went to the sidelines for a while, and I wonder if she matured greatly off the long break, because she came back in this race at Delaware Park. She went right to the lead, and she just showed this field her heels. They couldn't get close to her early, and she showed no rust off the layoff.
And that's a big thing. This wasn't a short layoff of 3 or 4 months. We'll come back and start her in the spring. We hadn't seen her since, November of her 2-year-old season. And I thought this was a great way to sort of see where she was. She didn't take a lot of love in there because of that layoff, but she ran dazzling, a career best buyer for her. And maybe she needs the lead. At this point, she really hasn't shown that she's comfortable rating, but the 2 times that she's found herself out of the money. We're just talking about deeper waters. I guess if you want to knock her, she's going to have to face You Almost Had Me again, who draws post 13 in here. But I just wonder if there's some upside with her second off the layoff. I think she has some potential in here. And she's 10-1 on the morning line. I think she could take a little bit of play, Dan, but I still think you'll be, north of 8-1.
The 7 is discreet ops, and I don't have her in my picks, but I do think she's a horse you may want to consider, because just glancing at her overall form, she seems dirtied up. Her last race was at Timonium, and I just don't think her late running style works very well over that bull ring at all. They tried her on turf 2 and 3 starts back. I think she's a 1-run closing sprinter on the dirt, and she ran okay in the Miss Preakness 3 starts back. I think this is what she wants to do. She's going to get pace, and I think she runs late at a price.
Yeah, undefeated at Laurel, 2 for 2. That's where she started her career. And you talked about the Miss Preakness, and I thought that performance in itself gives her sort of a chance here. Obviously, You Almost Had Me is the name that we keep on mentioning, was in front of this one, but only a length and a quarter, and discreet ops for the first time had to close from really far off of it. I know on debut, she was 7 lengths behind the pace setter, but we're talking about a horse that was, had 7 horses in front of her. It's a different sort of game when you have to close like that. And you wonder, with all the speed, it seems like as of late, she is more comfortable sitting off of it. And maybe that plays well to her here. I'm not going to count her last race against her. As you said, Timonium, I feel like, is like a Kentucky Downs. It's a horse for the course angle. And maybe she didn't like it there. It didn't work out well for her. And I think going back to Laurel Park, she's hard to knock so far.
Trainer Jose D'Angelo told me earlier this week that he thought the 8 Vincy girl would make a nice 4-year-old, that she still needed some time to mature. But after that maiden win 3 starts back, she really picked her head up and got into the game. She did beat winners in her first try out of the maiden ranks. And then last time out in the Charlestown Oaks, outside post position, 2-turn race, didn't break very well. Here's her start 2 starts back, where again, she has to beat winners straight out of the maiden ranks, and she runs them right down.
She does. And you're looking at this race at Gulfstream Park, and the pace in here did crumble a little bit, but those horses took play. They were about 4-1. They end up finishing 4th and 5th in this spot. But I thought the way that she draws off there was quite nice. And last time out, again, she had to close from off of it. It didn't work out for her. She didn't take any 11 there. I think 6 furlongs is fine for her. 7 ace has been okay as well. I just wonder, if this is a spot where she can kind of rebound. it's a tough spot when you go to the Grade 2 Charlestown Oaks, and it might not seem like it is, but on their big night, their card is loaded with horses, whether it's the Charlestown Classic or the Oaks. And they took a shot with her, but she's rebounded since then. You can see she only has that one published drill, and it's a snappy one.
Both of her wins did come against older horses. The 9 is Do We Do It, making her first start off the Lacey Gaudette claim. They dipped in for 62.5 for this one last time out. And while she didn't run great that day, going 3/4 of a mile, she was a little bit farther off the pace than she's used to. I think she's going to show speed in here. The problem is there are other speeds that might be in slightly better form.
It's curious to see what they're going to do with her. Obviously, that's not, little change to spend on a horse. That's pretty considerable. And her form was very good prior to that. Now, she didn't perform well at Parks, but they took a shot there. Obviously, the prior connection, she is a Pennsylvania bred. And last time out, I just kind of wondered in terms of the trip if it just didn't work out well for her. But the runner-up came back to win next time out. I think with her, I'm just very curious on the trip that she's going to get. Those last couple, it seems like they've switched a little bit, right? And it's new connections. So maybe they have a different game plan for her, and maybe they've made some changes. She has been on the shelf for a little bit. So I have to think they've been trying to, figure her out and what's sort of the best way to get her in the winner's circle.
If Cap Classique runs here, and she is a questionable starter, also entered in a graded stakes race at Churchill Downs on Saturday, she's a strong contender for trainer Brittany Russell, coming off a runner-up effort behind Carmelina in the Chenery at Colonial, where she sat the pocket, eased to the outside, and tried very hard all the way to the wire. She's going to get a good setup in this race. When I talked to Brittany in the winner's circle after post time one last week, she mentioned that Cap Classique was likely headed to Churchill, but that was before entries were taken for this race.
Yeah, it's tough to say what they'll do. Obviously, they have to talk to the owners as well. And, Sheldon is going to take another horse in here, but it's Brad Cox and business is business. So don't worry about that. The thing that I do worry about a little bit with this filly is just she hasn't won in a bit. And they've tried so many different things with her. We've seen her go from 5.5 to 1.125 in consecutive starts on the grass. She got back onto the dirt. I think that's probably where we're going to see her stay going forward, at least for a while. I think she's a better dirt filly. And I liked her performance last time out. When you're chasing those fractions, especially the quick ones that we talked about at Colonial, sometimes you're at the disadvantage. You're just kind of trying to catch up and you're really using yourself. But she only missed by a neck. Ben Curtis is booked to ride. I think he's been riding lights out. When you go back to Fairgrounds, you go to Colonial. I think this could be a really good combination going forward. And not that Sheldon didn't do well with this filly, but we'll see what they can do pairing up for the first time.
The Maryland bred, the 11, Miss Harriet, has beaten open stakes competition in the past, but she's going to come into this race after besting 3 others in the restricted Miss Disco Stakes at Laurel. Miss Harriet showed good speed that day, had to fend off a couple of pace pressers, and then held off the closer at the end. She's been freshened since that race, and I wonder if her young, capable trainer, Brandon McFarlane, is using this as a springboard to the Maryland Million, which she upset in the Lassie last year at 62-1 in her debut.
Certainly could be. I do think my concern with her specifically, Dan, is I do think she's sort of a need the lead type. I'm just going down the page. I've said a couple other fillies in here I'm not convinced with her. I'm more on the convinced side of it. And last time out, it worked out very well for her. And you go down the page, I'm just concerned, too, if she doesn't break well and she's not forwardly placed. We've seen that, say, 2 starts back, different surface, even 3 starts back in the Miss Preakness. She tried to chase the pace and was unable to close, but Discreet Ops was able to close. So just have a couple of knocks on her. If you like her in here, again, you're going to get great value. I think the barn's been doing very well. You mentioned young connections that are, winning at 15%. That goes noticed. And maybe the time off does her well. Maybe she comes in here and she's a little bit more fresh.
Yellow Feathers is a little bit of an interesting price play. It's not a great draw for a horse with speed, with other speeds to her inside, but just look at what she's done in her 2 starts on dirt. Both blowout wins, of course, against weaker competition, but her only losses came on the synth. She just seems like a better dirt horse, and it's not like her buyers are that far off the top contenders.
They're not, and I'm glad you point that out. I think that's the key. If she was running maybe 60 buyers on the dirt, we'd have a different opinion on her. I think I've seen worse 30-1 shots that have won their dirt races by open lengths and won them very easy. But this is going to be her first test for sort of class, where others in here, they've at least dabbled in stakes competition, whether that's been on turf, dirt, it depends. But for her, this is going to be the first big task. I do like that last time out, though, at least, even though it was only 7 other rivals, she faced older fillies. Now she gets back against 3-year-old fillies. That could help her chances. She'll be a big price here, but she's hard to ignore in some ways off those 2 dirt wins.
And you almost had me. Who's likely going to be the favorite in this race. is probably just simply the horse to beat. She won 3 stakes races as a 2-year-old, one against males, and she's kept really strong company this year, placing in a pair of graded stakes races. And she likely got her confidence back last time out with a stakes win over the Synth in the Lady Erie at Presque Isle Downs. What sort of trip can Sheldon hope for from post 13? Does he break and just sort of try to taper in without losing as much ground as possible and then try to come around them all in the stretch?
She doesn't need the lead to win. That's not a concern, right? If she's not in the front, I don't know, 1 or 2 horses early, that's okay. And I don't think she will be from post 13. I think that is probably the thing that hurts her the most. I think when you start to look at this race, had she drawn towards the inside, post 4 or 5, I think she'd be very tough to beat. But I do think this post does work against her. There is speed to the inside. If you want to go back, even say 2 efforts ago, 3 efforts ago, 4 efforts ago, look at her. She goes off favored and she still gets beat a fair bit of the time. So if she wins here and she romps, it's not shocking. She's trying Laurel for the first time. She has everything to kind of, make it work here. She's getting back on the dirt. I thought she raced great, though, in the Lake Erie. But I think 7-2 on the morning line is a gracious price. I still think she's going to get bet down from post 13, and anything shorter than that in this big field, I wouldn't take on her just because she's failed a lot as the favorite.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Weather Vane. I think we're going to go looking for a little bit of value. Carmelina is just so rock solid, and she seems to show up each and every time. We'll see what sort of trip she gets from post 4. She can be forward. I also think she can sit.
I think she can sit. We're going to have to see if she can sit and win will be the big question with her, but I have some confidence just based on her running style and loved her performance at Colonial. I thought that was a really tough race, and obviously that gave them confidence to send her to Saratoga, but I think this is the perfect spot for her to regroup, and I still use You Almost Had Me underneath in here. I just think there are some things that you can maybe poke holes, in the case to be made for her, and that's what I'm going to try to do.
If Cap Classique runs here, I just think she's a very logical contender, especially the way this pace could shake out. I'm a big fan of Miss Harriet. I wonder if she'll get cooked off the layoff on the pace, but I do think she'll be right in the thick of things, turning for home at a pretty square price. Maybe Vincy Girl, the 8, a horse that might not have cared for that 2-turn configuration at Charlestown last time, can come with a strong run. This is a really competitive affair. 4, 13, 10, and 6 for Ashley. 10, 11, 6, 8 for me. It's the Weather Vane, and it's one of 2 stakes races at Laurel on Sunday. Best of luck. Hey, let me give you a hot tip. If you liked the content that you've seen before, click on the like and subscribe button right here. And of course, for more DRF videos like Race of the Days, stakes previews, click on the videos right here.